What in the Law podcast is back with Mike Harris. And today we have a special guest, Mark Patterson, who is a cannabis advocate and so many other things involved with legislation. And he has some things to say about what's going on in Missouri with an election coming up where Mark is living now. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Michael.
So why don't we just start talking a little bit about who you are and how you got involved in legislation revolving cannabis. And well, you don't have to necessarily do your whole life story unless you want to, but you kind of have a very interesting, I think, background as far as ministry to what you've been doing more lately. Can you tell everyone a little bit about that?
Certainly, certainly. Well, from my story began here in Missouri, where I was born and raised, and all. I was working a lot whenever I got sick. I was putting in roughly around 80 hours a week. I worked three jobs. I worked for in power plants as a certified welder and pipe fitter. I had a computer consulting business and a benevolence ministry. I ran a food pantry related services that I did as well. Did a lot of hospital visitation and counseling and such. But then I got sick. I was exposed to heavy metals and from the lead processing business, which was right there where I was living in Herculaneum, Missouri. Also, as a welder, I was being exposed to similar chemicals as well. And it rendered me fully disabled. I had to leave all my jobs, including the ministry, and basically my life was pretty much over. But fortunately, finding a little blip on a fibromyalgia news group saying that cannabis could be effective in treating the pain that I was dealing with, I thought it was worth a try. And as it turns out, it was a remarkable experience and started me in a whole different direction, life-wise. And
Where did that take you? How did that treatment basically, how did that change things and what have you done with your life because of that?
Well, I had severe migraines and pain, fibromyalgia type pain all over my body. I was also susceptible to illnesses and such, cannabis just rather remarkably one by one helped free me from a lot of those situations. The migraines gradually got less and less and less with the cannabis treatments, as well as a lot of the pain that I dealt with too. And one of the remarkable things was I suffered considerable memory loss because of my illness, and cannabis helped to restore much of my memory as well, which was pretty remarkable.
And I know there's the stereotype that cannabis can make people forget, but it's affects people differently. Basically, how would you describe that?
Well, basically, what they're really referring to is the temporal effect that cannabis can have on our thinking. It can slow our thinking when we're consuming it and immediately thereafter. But the therapeutic benefits of cannabis last far beyond the euphoria that we experience with it. And that's really where the real medical side comes in. The temporary memory loss is of course it is a fact, and also short-term memory loss is also an effect, but it's only temporal. That's the most important thing about this. And so it basically restored my long-term memory, my thoughts, my memories as a child, my memories of my children, memories of my three children being born, things like that, things that you never really want to forget, people's names and such.
So what have you been doing as far as work regarding writing and proposed legislation and policy more recently?
Yeah, so basically what I found living here in Missouri was there was absolutely no way that I could be a cannabis patient and continue to live in Missouri. I was constantly under the threat of being arrested, losing my place where I was living at the time. I had gone right around the time that I was getting involved with cannabis and such. I was also going through a divorce, so I was having to relocate. And trying to find a place where you can medicate is hugely difficult in Colorado, let alone in a state like Missouri. So it was tough. So basically what I realized was I needed to get involved in the political side of things and do whatever I possibly can to change the law to where patients like myself could still live here in Missouri and be able to medicate. That meant my involvement with Normal, and I was involved with them for a period of time. But the thing that I was discovering overall is that what we needed was more than just a basic medical program and all the heavy-duty penalties that it encompassed. We needed real change. And and basically, I revised the House bill for the state of Missouri twice. And from that, that's when I saw that things weren't moving very quickly within the state house. I realized I had to explore the initiative process. And over the course of the last let's see, what's it been? Over 10 years, I guess now, I have been working on the initiative side. And I've actually drafted 5 full legalization initiatives for the state of Missouri so far. I also drafted one for Arkansas and for Oklahoma and Nebraska. It's up to them what they want to do with that.
By the way, for people who are not familiar, what is the difference of trying to get the law changed through normal legislation where your state legislature just passes laws versus the initiative process that you've been working on?
That's an excellent question. Most people don't realize that there is a difference in laws. There's a difference in the way that laws come to pass. When we're dealing with a House or a Senate bill, which is the local state bills, you're operating through the local lawmakers, your state lawmakers. They have to draft the policy. They have to take it. It has to be assigned to a committee, and it has to be voted on in committee. Then it has to be voted on the House floor. Senate, then it has to. Several other different things has to happen with it. It has to go. Then goes on to the Senate, and the Senate has to debate it and talk about it in committee and then vote on it before it even makes it to the governor. And then at that point, the governor can even veto it.
So if you do the other way with the initiative process, what have you done with that, and what is that like?
Well, part of the problem with the House and Senate bill is the fact that as it passes through all these different hands, it's constantly changing. People are adding things to it. People are stripping things away from things that the individual like yourself or myself may have not really wanted, but benefits the lawmaker politically or whatever. So basically what you end up with is far less than what you start out with. With a House bill, with the initiative process, it's considerably different. With the initiative process, it's different depending upon which state you live in. Not all states have the ability to do initiative process. Colorado, Missouri, Arkansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, these states can. There's only 16 in the whole country that can actually do a direct initiative. With a direct initiative, you can actually take an issue by collecting signatures. You collect enough signatures, you can get it put on a general ballot where the people can decide the outcome. It's all about choice. You can bypass the lawmakers. You can even bypass the governor himself with a direct initiative. That's where the real power is in this. That's how the Colorado bills got passed.
So why don't we talk a little bit about what's going on in Missouri that you're involved in? What is the law right now in Missouri as far as medical, recreational cannabis and what's allowed, basically?
Well, we have a medical bill here currently, and with that, patients can cultivate a minimal amount, and they can consume, of course. There's considerable restraints on that as far as how much you can grow and how much you can have on hand, how much you can have with you when you travel. All these rules are very confusing and unfortunately causes way too many patients to fall outside the legality and all that. But the fact is that patients can get a medical card here. It's only a 1-year card. And they can get a cultivation license. It's $25 for a medical card, $100 for cultivation. Most people find that it's easier to work through a service of some kind that can assist them and help walk them through the process because it can be very confusing. A lot of patients find that it takes them a couple of times to go through if they're doing it on their own. So, but it's a limited program, but it is something.
What's missing?
Oh, what's missing? What's missing is not necessarily just what's missing. It's also what things have been added. What we find with the medical bill is they took it upon themselves to make it illegal to make cannabis concentrate at home. That's a big one. That's a huge one. And they did that, and it would carry forward with the recreational bill if that were to pass as well. And a lot of it has to do with the reasons for that. They say it's for safety. I believe it's more to force people to have to go and utilize the dispensaries. The fact is that anyone who's cultivates for themselves, that takes a great deal of effort. That's a lot to do. And if a patient is cultivating for themselves, they're cultivating so that they can produce concentrate, particularly if they're dealing with chronic or terminal illness. And that would be FECO or RSO, Rick Simpson oil, cannabis oil. And unfortunately, that's been made illegal. And the reason why it was made illegal here, as well as in Colorado, is because of butane. Because butane was used to produce dabs for recreational purposes. And so they said, because of that, laws were passed in Colorado as well as across the country that basically said that no cannabis concentrate can be produced using a volatile substance like alcohol or butane or whatever. Well, when you produce FECO or RSO, you are using food grade alcohol, which is Everclear.
Is there something more dangerous about people using butane at home?
Butane is very, very dangerous because it is very explosive. What they found is that people were trying to produce dabs or cannabis concentrate for recreational purposes by using butane as the solvent to actually strip the oils from the plant material. The problem is that once that butane is released to the atmosphere, it turns to a gas very rapidly. What happened was there were people who probably shouldn't have been making concentrate. They were wearing long sleeve shirts and they were smoking while trying to do this. Well, butane's very volatile. The butane traveled up the sleeves of their shirts and was ignited by their cigarettes and basically turned them into a human torch. And very, very tragic, very terrible kind of a situation. And the fact is that cannabis concentrates do not have to be made from butane, not for recreational purposes and most certainly not for medical. It's just a cheaper process.
So are there ways without butane to make the concentrate at home that are safer? Or is this just a dangerous kind of thing that you have to really know what you're doing before you get involved with it?
Well, it's a bit of both, but the fact of the matter is that you don't have to use butane to produce cannabis oil. It's not necessary. As a matter of fact, on the recreational side in the dispensaries, they use everything, including CO2, for the process of creating the concentrates. Someone with a lot more skill level than me, as far from a dispensary point of view, would have to sound in on that. But I do know for individuals at home, it's quite safe to produce cannabis oil using Everclear or food grade alcohol. As I demoed for the Colorado State Highway Patrol, for the Thornton City Police Department, and then in Colorado Springs for the El Paso County Sheriff's Department. They literally leaned over the top of the device that I was producing while they were there, and they all agreed. The alcohol, the fumes from the alcohol dissipate very quickly. Understand that every day, both here in Missouri as well as in Colorado, in nice restaurants, they are producing flaming entrees and desserts in front of people in crowded dining rooms. Okay, they're doing this all the time right now. The one difference is they're doing it with something other than cannabis. That's the key in all this. Laws that were created to protect people is one thing. Laws created to negate cannabis use is another. And that's where we need to make that difference.
So, what is the status of recreational cannabis right now in Missouri? What's allowed or what's not allowed at all?
There's no recreational use in the state of Missouri currently. That is why we have bills like the Missouri Legal Missouri 2022 bill that's being pushed right now. And apparently it's going to be, Missourians will be able to vote on that here in November.
What is going on? What's on the ballot in November in Missouri? What's this about?
Well, this is, without really getting into it a great deal, which I rather not this go around, but just kind of explain to you in a nutshell, basically what it amounts to, what they are offering, what they are saying in their television ads and on the news programs too, as a matter of fact, is really not really truthful. They're saying that they're offering complete legalization. It isn't. It carries a great deal of restrictions and penalties on the far end that can be very severe depending upon the scenario. They're talking about expungement of records, people's records, which these are really good things. Legalization, adult use, absolutely. We should have adult use. Why? Because cannabis is non-toxic. It's not going to hurt you. There's no legal reason. There's no reason to keep it illegal. But from recreational point of view, this bill would allow limited cultivation and some recreational use. There's considerable confusion between the rules for medical and recreational in this regard, and that's a bit of an issue. One of the good things that this bill would do is to increase the amount of time that a medical patient can have a license from 1 year to 3, which is where it should have been to begin with. There was no reason why they made it only 1 year, except to make it more difficult for patients to be able to have a card. We talked about expungement. That's one of the hot topics here in Missouri right now about expungement of records. It's not an automatic expungement. They keep saying that. What it will be is it's kind of a time release thing where they work with some misdemeanors and they work the way up to felonies and such. But in all the criteria, it's very strict in the fact that you are not eligible for expungement if your cannabis use was involved driving an automobile, or you were in an automobile when that took place. If in any way, shape, or form it could have involved someone under the age of 21, you were automatically not eligible. So, but probably one of the things that I find really confusing about this is that it doesn't actually erase your records. What it does is it compartmentalizes your records, and which sounds pretty good, except for the fact that by court order, those records can be retrieved at any given time.
So there's some limits. What does it do as far as, is there some sort of problems that some people think about making things more difficult in some regards? I think there was something about a weight issue or something with the proposed legislation.
When it comes to expungement, it has to be 3 pounds or less of plant material. And the unfortunate thing about that is it doesn't make good enough clarification about what they're actually saying in that regard. And the issue I have is from a recreational standpoint, and if all you are producing is all you are doing is purchasing very small amounts, recreational amounts of cannabis, that's the sort of thing that you can have stripped from your record. If you were a medical patient, and particularly someone with severe chronic or terminal illness, where you are needed to produce concentrates, again, comes back to the whole concentrate issue again. The problem there is that it takes a great deal of plant material to do that. And going over 3 pounds is a very easy thing to do when you start talking about all the different parts of the plant, from the things that you throw away and from to the whole process that's required, as far as particularly if it was possible to do it with a substance like Everclear, which of course it's not right now, but if it was, it takes a great deal of alcohol, takes a great deal of plant material to get a very small amount. Back in the day, we used to say it would take a pound to a pound and a half of plant material to produce a cancer regimen per se. So you kind of get the idea of what we're talking about here. The problem is that when you get to that limit, it's very easy. You can fall off the other side, and the penalties get very, very strict very quickly. If you produce cannabis oil currently, if you produce cannabis oil at home in the state of Missouri, it will be $1,000 fine.
Are there parts of the proposed legislation or the initiative that people are voting on, as far as what you're going to be? Is it going to limit anything? Is there anything, any kind of drawbacks as far as what you can do here going forward from this?
The biggest problem with this is, and what I'm hearing a lot on Facebook and other sources, people are saying, well, let's just get this passed and move on. Well, there's big time problems with this. So it's going to be a lot more difficult to change, because we're dealing with the Constitution of the state. And when you deal with the Constitution, it's far easier to add things than it is to take things away. But
the proposal, I mean, is there a lot of technical minutia? I mean, it's more than just saying cannabis is legal and leave it at that. There's a lot more in there, it sounds like.
Absolutely. I mean, with the people who are pushing legal mode 2022, they have reportedly like $4 million behind them from the industry backing them up. It's a whole lot easier to change policy when you have monies like that, particularly when you're dealing with issues like petitioning. You have to petition across the state and from multiple counties and get a majority of people voting. That is difficult. It's difficult getting volunteers together, enough volunteers to be able to achieve that. You're looking at somewhere like, I think it's something like 180,000 signatures in the state of Missouri, somewhere along that area, to be able to get something put on the ballot. And that's difficult. And it's really easy to mess that up too, as well.
So, but is there anything that's a problem, that's limiting if this passes, as far as concentrating in certain businesses and making it more difficult for some people? Anything like that that's a problem?
Oh, this again, a lot of problems though, Michael. It's all of these things are really problems. They're all real concerns, and the problem is that it all affects the individual. When you were talking about building dispensaries and such and providing laws that benefit dispensaries, that's a lot different than what happens with the individual, particularly people like individuals. Good case in point, and this is with the medical bill as well as with the rec bill, is the issues with driving under the influence is a big one. Under the current law for Missouri, as actually for the current law under the state of Colorado as well, upwards of 20% of the population would not be able to drive a car. One of the things that's stated very, very matter-of-factly within Legal Missouri 2022 is that they deliberately didn't address the issues of DUI and some of these other issues like that. They left those up to the state. In fact, even made them a little bit worse in some ways. That's a real problem. It's a real problem. The cost of cannabis is a real issue for a lot of people. What individual can afford to spend, when we're talking about a patient for that matter, upwards of $300 to $500 to $1,000 a month on cannabis? Most can't.
Is there something in this proposed legislation that's going to make it more expensive, potentially?
It's going to make things. It does make things more difficult for patients, a bit more restrictive for patients. I don't think that. Yes, I think that it has the potential of helping the cost to stay the same, as we saw with rec in Colorado. It took a very long time to start seeing the price start to work its way down. And it wasn't necessarily because of the passage of a rec bill. It was because more people were using cannabis. And the more people who use cannabis, more cannabis is produced and price comes down. Another issue that's a real problem, if I could just very quickly, and this goes beyond the Missouri bill, it goes to other bills as well, is stockpiling. And I've mentioned this a number of times to different people about the issues of stockpiling. And this is an issue for if you're a Coloradoan or a Missourian, in the fact that the laws are very minimal as far as what you can possess on you, what you can carry on you, how much cannabis that you can have in your home. And what we find is that even with the current limits on cannabis, as far as how much you can cultivate, come harvest time, if you're a decent grower, you will go over those amounts. If you had anything before you harvested, you're going over your amounts. So these are problems. That's not a problem.
There's a lot of not as glamorous parts in this proposal that's going to make things more difficult, essentially.
It's just leaving things the same is bad enough. Perhaps the worst thing that bills like this do. And again, I really didn't want to get too much involved in talking about the bill, but perhaps the worst thing that bills like this do is it makes it harder for people like myself who are trying to bring about real legalization, both here in Missouri and across the country. It pushes that further away because it makes a lot more involvement when you're trying to take something out of the Constitution. It can be very difficult to do, as I said. It creates a great deal more paperwork, not just for the people writing it, but for the people who are out there doing the petitioning. Those people will have to carry literally a ream of paper around with them as they collect signatures. And, it's just insanity. It really is. When we realize, again, cannabis is non-toxic, all this dancing around really has no purpose. And all the money that's being spent on all these different activities, we could have brought about real legalization and been done with it all. And we wouldn't have had to worry about people being arrested.
What do you mean, by the way, when we say real legalization?
What's that?
What do you mean when you say real legalization, by the way?
Real legalization is this, in my opinion, real legalization means cannabis being as legal as any agricultural crop, the same as lettuce or spinach or any other product. This is why cannabis never should have been compared to alcohol, because alcohol is toxic. Cannabis is non-toxic. It's non-toxic. And the only way you can make cannabis toxic is by adding something to it that is toxic. And we see that, or a particular process. And we see this, there are processes that are going on now. We saw it all the way back when Marinol originally happened, with the creation of these artificial substances that are, quote, marijuana-like. These are toxins. And this is what happens when the pharmaceutical industry gets a hold of a natural plant. They turn it into something toxic.
So I think that's a very kind of good, helpful thing to kind of think about what to look for. And when you vote for any initiative, there's a lot of parts sometimes. You got to read them all.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything else, before we kind of wrap it up here, anything else that we missed that you wanted to talk about regarding with this petition or anything else that's going on?
Well, this goes for anyone listening in any state across the country, is you need to read. This is vitally important. It's so very important. And your involvement in law, Michael, this is a big one for you. I'm sure that I bet you've said many a time, read, understand what the law actually says and what these changes are going to accomplish. The authors of bills like this one here, they deliberately make them very long. This one here, I thought it was like over 25 pages. I heard it's actually even more than that. Now, I haven't actually gotten down and counted them. But the reason for so many pages, is so that people don't read it. So only a select group of people actually will know what these things actually say. When I drafted my initiative, cannabis restoration, it was one page one page, 8.5 by 14. And I really worked hard to put it in a language that individuals could understand. I have begged people for the last 10 years, I have begged people, please, 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 read before you vote on something, read and make sure it's really what you want. Don't think that otherwise. Don't think
By the way,
otherwise.
speaking of reading, you have some writings on the internet, or where can people find you and find your information and things you've written about?
Absolutely. My website is Cannabis Patient Network, all one word, Cannabis Patient Network dot, excuse me, cannabispatientnetwork.com. And you can, I see many of my articles are listed there. My critiques of initiatives, both for the state of Missouri as well as for Oklahoma. Oklahoma's got a recreational bill coming up, very similar to the ones that's happening here in Missouri. I haven't read their final draft yet, but I urge you, we have less than 2 weeks now till the next election. It's vitally important that everyone who has an interest in cannabis legalization needs to read it. Please, please, please read it in its entirety. Go to my website, read my critiques, then go to the Secretary of State's website and check out the initiative for yourself. Don't take it at word of mouth. Don't take what they're saying in the television ads and such. Read it and know it for yourself.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a very good day, a day of firsts in many ways, because you're actually my first non-lawyer guest on the Law Show. You're the first person who's been on both my law show and the other show, the poetry show, and you were my first guest on the poetry show. And I'm not sure I would have kept that going, but I had your encouragement and you came on, and that was really a wonderful performance. And it's a very beautiful readings, and that show's going well too. So
Awesome.
check out all my stuff. I got the Smokin' Poetry podcast. We got What in the Law podcast, and we're meeting all kinds of wonderful people and bringing all kinds of information to the world and some fun to the world too. So thank you. And I'll see you next time on What in the Law podcast.